I discovered my husband was planning a divorce, so I moved my $350 million fortune. The day after, he served me papers with a fake look of concern, acting like the victim. But what he didn't know was that everything he had tried to build behind, my back was already crumbling beneath his feet. It all started 3 weeks before that morning. I was in bed, half asleep, when I realized Daniel wasn't beside me. That wasn't unusual. He had insomnia sometimes. But the clock read 3:47 a.m., and the hallway light was off. I reached for the comforter, but the other side of the bed was cold, not recently empty. It had been that way for hours. As I sat up, I heard a voice. His voice. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. It came faintly through the half-open door to his office. I stepped out barefoot, careful not to let the floorboards creak. The hallway was dark, but I could hear the low hum of Daniel speaking on the phone. Calm. Calculated. No, she doesn't suspect anything yet. I'll get the signature next week. Just wait. I froze. I don't know how long I stood there. My stomach twisted so tight it made my knees weak. When I heard the chair roll and the sound of him standing up, I rushed back to bed and pulled the covers over me. My pulse pounded in my ears. A moment later, the bedroom door opened and he walked in. The mattress dipped slightly when he lay down. I turned toward him slowly. You okay? My voice was soft, groggy, pretending I had just woken. Yeah, he said. Couldn't sleep. Checked a few emails. The lie was so smooth it scared me. I didn't say anything. I turned back and stared at the ceiling until I heard his breathing level out. He fell asleep fast, like nothing was wrong, but something was very wrong. The next morning, I waited until he went to the gym, like he did every Thursday. I went to his office. I wasn't snooping. I was surviving. He had left his laptop open, which he never did before. The screen was black, but when I tapped the trackpad, it lit up, still logged in. There was a folder on the desktop called Asset Plan, Private. I opened it, heart pounding, hands sweating. The first thing I saw was a spreadsheet. A full breakdown of our properties, stocks, retirement accounts, and even my personal holdings. Things that should have been confidential. I kept my finances. Separate since the day we married. That was our agreement. I had earned that money before he came into my life. And yet, there it was. Detailed, mapped out, color-coded. But what stopped me cold was the line that said, projected division post-divorce. And beneath that, Claire, 43%. Daniel, 57%. I sat back in the chair and tried to breathe. My entire body felt like it had been dropped in ice water. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't stress. This was premeditated. He was preparing to leave me and take more than half of everything I had worked for over 4 decades. And the worst part? I never saw it coming. I had built my business from scratch. From a single lab in my garage to one of the largest pharmaceutical research firms in the country. I sold it 4 years ago for $350 million. Daniel came into my life after the company had already gone public. He had nothing to do with it. He was charming, patient, made me feel safe again after my first husband passed. I thought he saw me as more than just a checkbook. Now I wasn't sure he ever did. That afternoon, I acted normal. I cooked his favorite meal, grilled salmon with lemon and thyme, and even asked about his gym session. He smiled, kissed my cheek, and told me I was glowing. I watched him eat, watched his hands, his posture, the way he glanced at his phone every few minutes. Every little movement now felt rehearsed. I didn't confront him. I wasn't ready. Instead, I contacted someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Harriet. Bloom. She was my personal accountant for 2 decades before she retired. But Harriet didn't just manage money. She protected people. When I told her what I found, she didn't sound surprised. He's been preparing this for a while, she said, but we're going to move faster. That same week, Harriet and I set everything in motion. We restructured the trusts. We moved assets into international holding structures. We closed access points he didn't even know existed. We put everything behind legal walls that not even the most aggressive divorce attorney could breach. By the time Daniel handed me those papers, I had already disappeared. Financially. He looked surprised when I opened the envelope, sitting calmly. At the kitchen island. "I'm sorry it had to come to this," he said, voice low, rehearsed, "but I think it's for the best." I nodded, slowly, then looked at him. "I moved the money," I said. The way his face shifted, just for a second, told me everything I needed to know. Shock, fear, confusion. Then that fake calm returned. "What? Do you mean?" "You heard me," I replied. "It's gone. You won't get a cent." He tried to recover. "Claire, let's not make this messy." I just stood up. "It's already done, Daniel. You planned this." I simply responded. He didn't say another word. He just watched me as I walked away. But I wasn't walking away from a marriage. I was walking away from the version of me that trusted him. And I didn't look back. That night, I sat alone in the guest bedroom. My own room. I hadn't slept beside him since the night I overheard that phone call. I stared at the divorce papers, unsigned, sitting on the dresser. My lawyer would handle it from here. I had nothing left to say to him, but I knew Daniel wasn't finished. Men like him never are. He had lost access to the money, but he still had one more move, and whatever it was, I knew he was planning it already. After I told Daniel I had moved the money, he didn't say much. He just stared at me like he didn't believe it, like he thought I was bluffing. But the next day, I saw the shift. He stopped trying to be polite. He got up early, didn't say a word over coffee, didn't ask about my day. We shared the same kitchen, the same hallway, the same silence. But now, everything was colder. I had broken whatever script he was following, and he didn't know what to do without it. By that afternoon, his lawyer had already emailed mine. There was a new proposal on the table. Daniel wanted to settle privately, no court, no public documents. He even offered to walk away from some properties out of respect. That made me laugh. There was no respect in any of this. He didn't know yet that I had already met with 2 attorneys and a forensic accountant. Not because I was scared, but because I knew men like him didn't stop after losing. They just changed. Tactics. Harriet told me he had already hired one of the most aggressive divorce lawyers in the city. "He's hoping to scare you," she said, "or at least wear you down." I wasn't scared, but I was angry. What I didn't expect was the visit. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I had just gotten back from lunch with Harriet. We were going over the second phase of asset protection, shifting. Legal ownership of the vacation homes into a family foundation, one with no ties to Daniel. I was unlocking the front door when I saw the car, a dark gray SUV I didn't recognize. Parked 2 houses down, a man got out, business suit, short haircut, clipboard. He didn't look like a delivery driver or a neighbor. He looked official. He approached casually, like this was normal. "Claire Baldwin?" I nodded slowly, not answering right away. He handed me an envelope. "You've been served." I took it. He walked off without another word. Inside the envelope was a formal motion for a temporary restraining order, filed by Daniel. The claim? That I was emotionally unstable, and that he feared I would retaliate violently due to financial disagreements. I stared at the paperwork for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I sat down in the living room, turned off the phone, and read every line. It was ridiculous, weakly written, but dangerous if ignored. He was trying to create a record. Paint me as volatile, the kind of woman who lashes out when things don't go her way. It was a setup for future custody battles, if we had children, or for negotiating alimony. Except we didn't have children, and I wasn't unstable. I called, "My attorney, Helen Monroe. I'm forwarding you the documents," I said. She had already heard. "We'll handle it. It won't stick. But it tells us something important. He's escalating, and fast. I hung up and went upstairs. My hands were steady, but my chest was tight. Not from fear, from betrayal layered on top of betrayal. Thought back to how we met. It was 10 years ago. I had just finalized the deal to sell my company. I wasn't looking for anyone. I was burned out, tired of boardrooms, tired of being the only woman in the room, tired of being told to smile more. Daniel came into my life like a safe place, quiet, supportive. He never asked about my money. He acted indifferent to it. That's what made me trust him. I thought he saw me, but now I could see that he had studied me, learned my patterns, built an image of a man who didn't care until it was time to strike. By Friday morning, he was gone. No note, no explanation. Just his clothes missing and his car not in the driveway. He had moved out. That should have made things easier. But it didn't, because 2 days later, I got a message from my assistant, Lauren. She still managed my foundation's affairs and part of my calendar. Hi, Claire. Sorry to bother you on a Sunday. Just wanted to confirm. Should I cancel your keynote for the Women's Business Summit next month? Daniel told the organizers you were withdrawing due to health reasons. I stopped breathing for a second. I called her immediately. Lauren, I didn't cancel anything. Why would he say that? I assumed it came from you, she said. He told them personally, said you were overwhelmed and needed rest. I felt heat in my neck. He wasn't just attacking me in court. He was starting to smear me publicly. That's when I realized he didn't just want money. He wanted to ruin me. I spent the next few days reviewing everything, not just legal paperwork, emails, shared accounts, calendar invites, old voicemails, looking for patterns. And that's when I noticed something that didn't make sense. A recurring name in our shared expense log, Callahan Strategies, $9,750. Then another $12,500. Then a final charge for $21,300. Spread out over the last 6 months, I had never heard of them. I called the number listed. A woman answered, crisp and professional. Callahan Strategies. How can I help you? Yes, I'm trying to confirm if Daniel Baldwin is a client. There was a pause. I'm sorry, we don't disclose client lists. I understand. Just wondering what kind of service you provide. We specialize in reputation management, she said carefully. Online content, press strategy, public relations. I hung up. Now it made sense. Daniel hadn't just planned the divorce. He had hired professionals to start rewriting the narrative before he served me, to make himself the victim, to make me look erratic, unstable, controlling. I had heard about men doing that, building a trail of subtle concerns to use later, getting ahead of the truth, turning sympathy toward them before their wives even knew something was wrong, and Daniel had executed it quietly, efficiently, like a business deal. He never raised his voice, never got violent. He just started removing me, piece by piece, from the story of my own life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how far he was willing to go, and what I still hadn't seen yet, because if he had planned this far ahead, I had to assume there was more. And I was right. The next morning, I got a call from Harriet. Claire, you're not going to like this, she said. She sent me a PDF. It was a bank statement from an old dormant account I had forgotten existed. It hadn't been used in years, but now, someone had tried to access it online, twice, from an IP address, registered to a co-working space in downtown Chicago. Harriet traced it. The IP address was linked to a company called Lark & Finch Legal Consulting, and the registered contact? Rachel Hammond, Daniel's daughter from his first marriage. We had never been close, but I thought she was harmless. She lived in Boston, visited maybe twice a year, and always acted like I was too formal for her taste. Now she was trying to hack into my accounts. Do you think Daniel put her up to it? I asked Harriet. Probably, or she offered. I couldn't believe it, but I wasn't surprised, not anymore. That evening, I locked my office door and poured myself a glass of wine. I sat down and wrote a list on a yellow legal pad. Not names, not accusations, just facts. Daniel hired a divorce attorney before he spoke to me. He contacted a reputation firm months ago. He tried to cancel a public engagement under my name. He filed a restraining order with fabricated claims. His daughter tried to access one of my accounts. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was an operation. And the more I understood it, the more I knew. This wasn't just about money. This was about power. But I had one thing he never expected. I was already ahead, and I wasn't finished yet. I never trusted Rachel, but I also never thought she had the patience or subtlety to be dangerous. She wasn't like Daniel. She was louder, always more transparent with her contempt. When we first met, she gave me a stiff hug and called me Claire in a tone that made it clear she didn't want a stepmother. I didn't push it. She was 22 at the time, still in college, used to getting attention without having to earn it. I assumed her attitude would mellow. It didn't. Over the years, she visited less and less. Birthdays, holidays, occasional, weekends when Daniel insisted. When she did come, she acted like she was doing us a favor. She never asked about my work, never commented on the house I designed from the ground up. She rolled her eyes at my cooking, and once even joked at dinner. Well, Claire, at least if this marriage thing doesn't work out, you can always open a retirement catering business. Daniel had laughed. That should have told me everything. Now, 10 years later, Rachel was part of the plan. A quiet, nasty extension of her father's agenda. After Harriet told me about the login attempt, we checked all my old accounts, every dormant trust, every rarely used digital wallet, even the private donation account tied to my charity work. 2 more had been accessed. All through that same IP address in Chicago, we confronted the bank. They couldn't tell us much, only that someone had tried to answer security questions using my birth date and my first pet's name. Information Rachel could have easily guessed, especially if Daniel fed it to her. It was sloppy, and it was desperate, but it was also enough to make me take the next step. I told Helen, my attorney, we were filing a motion of our own, not to respond to his restraining order. That would be handled in court, and it would be dismissed. No, I wanted to go on record. I wanted to expose the full scope of what Daniel and Rachel were doing, the hacking attempt, the premeditated smear campaign, the financial espionage. I'm tired of being quiet, I told Helen. They wanted a fight. Let's give them one. She didn't blink. We'll do it by the book. We documented everything, dates, IP addresses, forensic reports, Harriet. Wrote an affidavit. I recorded my own statement. I even pulled up old emails from Daniel, messages where he encouraged me to centralize my accounts, send him lists of passwords, just in case. That wasn't love. It was surveillance. The day we filed, I sat in Helen's office and watched as she sent the final documents to the court. She looked at me. He's going to react. I know. And he did. Less than 24 hours later, Daniel showed up at the house. No warning. No call. I was in the living room when I heard the car door slam. I opened the blinds and saw him, walking toward the front steps, hands in his pockets, calm like always. I opened the door before he rang. Claire, he said, voice measured. Can we talk? I didn't move. You can talk. I'll listen. For now. He exhaled. This is getting out of hand. No, Daniel. This is what happens when you try to manipulate someone who's smarter than you. He glanced at the security. Camera mounted over the doorframe. His face twitched. I'm not here to argue, he said. But Rachel's been pulled into something she doesn't fully understand. She was just trying to help. I folded my arms. She tried to access protected financial accounts using stolen credentials. She made a mistake. Don't insult me. He paused, then stepped closer. Claire, if this goes public, it'll affect your reputation too. There it was, not a threat, but a warning wrapped in concern. Classic Daniel. I stared at him. You're right. It might. But you know what's worse than bad press? Silence. Silence lets people like you keep doing this to other women. His mouth tightened. I'm not the villain here. You planned. A divorce. Hired PR handlers. Filed a false restraining order. Let your daughter break the law. And now you're here trying to frame this like a misunderstanding. What does that make you, Daniel? He didn't answer. I took a step forward. Leave. And don't come back. His voice dropped. I'm not finished. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. That's what you don't get. I am. I shut the door. That night, I barely slept. Not from stress, but from clarity. They weren't going to stop. Not Daniel, not Rachel. The money was gone, but now they were fighting for something else. Reputation, image, legacy. Daniel couldn't stand the idea of being the man who lost everything to the woman he tried to manipulate. And Rachel? She had spent years acting like I didn't matter. Now, suddenly, she wanted to play power games. I needed to protect myself on another level. I met with Helen and Harriet the next morning. We agreed on the next steps. Harriet would begin working with a cybersecurity firm to monitor all my accounts in real time. Helen would request a temporary injunction against Rachel, barring her from any attempt to access or contact me directly. We also flagged Rachel's name in every financial institution tied to my network. And then came the part I hated most. We had to notify the authorities. Not because I wanted Rachel arrested, but because I needed it on file. I needed documentation. If they pushed harder, I had to show that I had followed every legal protocol. I gave my statement to the detective. When I finished, he asked one question that stuck with me. Why didn't you report her earlier? I shrugged. Because I didn't want to believe someone who sat at my table for 10 years was capable of this. He didn't say anything, just nodded and turned off the recorder. By Friday, Daniel's attorney filed a motion to dismiss all allegations. They claimed Rachel's access attempts were accidental, that she was confused by the logins, and had simply clicked the wrong links. Helen read the motion out loud in her office, then tossed it onto the table. He's running out of options, she said. This is a delay tactic, nothing more. Still, it made me sick. The lies, the arrogance, the complete lack of remorse. Drove home that night and found an envelope taped to my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, no signature. It read, "You're going to regret this. Keep pushing, and you'll lose more than money." I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I took it inside and gave it to Harriet. She scanned it, shook her head, and called our contact at the police department. We added it to the report. But I already knew who sent it. Rachel. Daniel would never put something like that in writing. He was too careful, but Rachel was impulsive, emotional, sloppy. I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I just added it to the list. The list of reasons why walking away wasn't enough. Now I had to make sure they couldn't follow, because I was done playing defense. After the letter showed up in my mailbox, I didn't waste time wondering who sent it. The language was too familiar, just vague enough to dodge legal trouble, but laced with intent. It wasn't written to scare me. It was written to throw me off balance. I didn't report it for drama. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't mention it to any of my old friends. I gave it straight to Helen, and she passed it to the detective assigned. To the hacking report. Keep everything documented, she told me. They're trying to provoke a reaction. I knew that. That's why I didn't show one. Instead, I shifted my attention to what Daniel never expected me to do, go fully public. Until now, everything had been handled quietly. Legal motions, private filings, sealed asset transfers, confidential trusts. But Daniel had already tried using the media, and Rachel had already crossed a criminal line. They were counting on me to stay silent to protect my image, so I stopped hiding. I scheduled a meeting with the board of my own charitable foundation. I told them everything. Not the gossip, the facts, what Daniel had done, what Rachel had tried. The steps I had taken to protect the organization's integrity. I made sure the minutes reflected it. I then contacted our PR director and had her prepare a brief, factual statement in case any press inquiries came our way. "If you receive questions, you respond with clarity," I said. "No emotion, no speculation, just facts." The reason I did this wasn't revenge, it was containment. Daniel's reputation management firm was already seeding doubts. A whisper here, a planted story there, quiet claims that I was paranoid or controlling or experiencing burnout. They wanted to damage me without getting their hands dirty. I wasn't going to match their tactics. I was going to make their tactics irrelevant. That week, I made one more move. I hired a private investigator. Helen didn't love the idea at first. "You're already ahead. Why add gasoline to this?" "Because I don't trust what I can't see," I said. "And Daniel always has a next move." The investigator, Mark Langley, wasn't flashy. No trench coat, no weird sunglasses. He was former military, clean-cut, methodical. He didn't ask why I needed the information. Just nodded, took the file I gave him, and said, "I'll start with Rachel." A week later, he came back with everything. Rachel wasn't in Boston anymore. She had moved to Chicago 2 months prior, rented a short-term condo downtown, and registered a new LLC in her name, Hammond Media Consulting, the same address tied to the IP address that tried accessing my financial accounts. But that wasn't the worst part. Mark also discovered that Rachel had been in regular contact with someone named Callahan, the same Callahan behind the PR firm Daniel had hired. Text records, shared billing addresses, cross-referenced payments. Daniel hadn't just hired Callahan Strategies, he had looped in Rachel as a back-channel operator, meaning she was part of the campaign to discredit me from the beginning. That wasn't just betrayal. That was premeditated sabotage. And now, I had enough to file a separate suit, one not just tied to the divorce, but directly to defamation, invasion of privacy, and conspiracy to commit digital fraud. Helen reviewed the findings and didn't hesitate. "This is airtight," she said. "If we go forward, we aren't just playing defense anymore. We're taking the wheel." I gave the order that same day. File everything. That weekend, Daniel tried again. He showed up at the club where I used to play tennis on Sunday mornings. He knew I'd be there. I was in the lounge with 2 acquaintances when he walked in like nothing was wrong. "Claire," he said, casual like we were still married. I didn't get up. I didn't introduce him to anyone. I just looked at him and said, "You shouldn't be here." He gave a tight smile. "I thought maybe we could talk privately. Things are escalating. We need to take a breath." I stood. "You tried to ruin my name. You used your daughter to do it. You tried to access accounts that were never yours." "There's no conversation left, Daniel." His face shifted, barely, but I saw it. He didn't expect me to say it in front of others. He still thought I'd play the same old role, composed, reserved, private. "I'm not doing this here," he said, eyes tightening. "You already did." I left him standing there. The next morning, my attorney called. Daniel's team just offered a settlement, Helen said. They want everything sealed. No admission of guilt. No further litigation. And what would I get? An NDA, a public joint statement, a quiet divorce, and half of what's left. I laughed. He's negotiating with assets he can't access. I know, she said. But this tells us something important. He knows he's bleeding. Decline. The offer. You sure? Completely. 3 days later, Rachel's attorney contacted Helen with a warning. If we didn't drop the suit, they would file a counterclaim for emotional distress and damage to future employment prospects. I told Helen to respond with 3 documents: the IP address logs, the video footage of Rachel at the co-working space, and the signed lease agreement of her Chicago apartment, under the same billing name as Callahan. The next day, we got silence. Nothing. From Daniel. Nothing from Rachel. No press inquiries, no calls, just silence, which told me one thing. They were regrouping. That night, I checked the security cameras around my property, again. All systems were still clean, the motion lights, triggered on time. No signs of tampering. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel wasn't finished, and I was right. Because the next morning, Helen walked into our meeting with a folder. Claire, she said. We just got served. Daniel was filing for spousal support. Despite everything, despite being the one who initiated the divorce, despite not contributing a cent to any of my businesses, despite living in a home I designed, maintained, and protected. He now wanted monthly alimony. I don't even know what to say, I told Helen. You don't have to say anything, she said. We're going to destroy this in court. We filed a full opposition within 48 hours. Harriet provided a full financial timeline. Mark Langley added a separate report about Daniel's hidden investments. Yes, he had side assets too, but hadn't disclosed them in court. Now he wasn't just a liar. He was hiding financials while claiming poverty. By the time the hearing date was set, I was ready, but I wasn't angry anymore. I was done reacting. I was rebuilding. I had spent weeks playing defense, fixing, blocking, dodging, but now I understood something Daniel never could. I wasn't trying to win. I was removing him. Quietly. Completely. Permanently. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No wood-paneled walls, no sweeping staircase, just a square, windowless room with tan walls and poor lighting. But the tension inside could have cracked concrete. Daniel sat across from me. His lawyer, Robert Shull, was the kind of man who smiled too easily. He leaned back in his chair like this was just another routine hearing. I recognized the performance. They were still playing the same role. Reasonable man caught in an unfortunate divorce. Helen leaned closer and whispered, "He still thinks he can control this." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We had come prepared. Our team included Helen, Harriet, and a young associate who handled the tech side. On the other end, Daniel had Shull, and to my surprise, Rachel. She wasn't listed on the docket. She wasn't supposed to be there, but there she was, sitting behind Daniel with her arms crossed and her mouth set in a thin line. I could tell she didn't like the room. She wasn't built for silence. Rachel liked being the one speaking, manipulating, redirecting. But today the script wasn't hers. The judge entered, a woman in her late 60s with short gray hair and a no-nonsense tone. She didn't smile, didn't greet anyone, just opened the file and began. This is case number 19 CV 4712, Baldwin v. Baldwin. We are here to hear arguments regarding the defendant's request for spousal support, as well as the counter-motion regarding financial misconduct and digital intrusion. Daniel's lawyer stood up first. Your Honor, my client seeks a fair and equitable outcome. Mr. Baldwin has been financially and emotionally impacted by the dissolution of this marriage. He requests modest support while transitioning into a new phase of life. He used the word transition like Daniel had suffered a layoff. Helen didn't interrupt. She just took notes, calmly, waiting her turn. When it came, she stood up slowly, walked to the center, and began. Your Honor, the timeline is critical here. Mr. Baldwin didn't just fall into hardship. He orchestrated a divorce while living off Ms. Baldwin's estate. He hired a PR firm 6 months before filing. He and his daughter made multiple unauthorized attempts to access restricted financial accounts. We have evidence of coordinated digital intrusion, manipulation, and reputational sabotage. The judge looked up. Are these claims documented? They are. I've submitted exhibits A through F in your file. We also have sworn affidavits from 2 independent investigators and 1 financial advisor. She didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She presented facts. The judge flipped through the paperwork. Her face didn't move, but I saw the pace of her reading change. After reviewing, she looked at Shull. How does your client respond to the allegation that he attempted to gain unauthorized access to funds through a third party? Shull cleared his throat. We believe this is a misunderstanding. Mr. Baldwin's daughter may have acted on misinformation. The judge cut him off. The daughter is not the party in this suit. That's when Rachel stood up. Your Honor, if I may? No, the judge said, not even looking at her. You are not listed on this motion. Please remain seated. Rachel slowly sat down. Her face was burning red. She looked at Daniel. He didn't look back. Helen continued, We are also asking the court to dismiss the request for spousal support on grounds of concealment of assets. Mr. Baldwin failed to disclose multiple private holdings and investment accounts which were later uncovered by our team. She handed over the report from Mark Langley, the investigator. The judge skimmed it. Your client has a private brokerage account in New York? Shull hesitated. I wasn't aware of that. Helen raised an eyebrow. Exactly. The judge turned to Daniel. Did you fail to disclose this account, Mr. Baldwin? Daniel shifted in his seat. I didn't think it was relevant. It is. When you request support from this court, full financial transparency is mandatory. That account alone holds just over $320,000 in liquid investments. He didn't answer. She continued flipping through the file. Let's also address the digital intrusion. Your daughter attempted to access financial accounts belonging solely to Ms. Baldwin. Do you deny encouraging or assisting in that? Daniel looked at Rachel. Rachel stared back at him. And that's when I saw it. The break. He was about to throw her under the bus. No, he said finally. She acted on her own. I didn't authorize anything. Rachel stood up. That's not true. The judge didn't even look at her. Ms. Hammond, sit down. Rachel sat, but her eyes were fixed on him now. Cold, furious. Helen stood again. Your Honor, based on these findings, we're formally requesting a denial of the spousal support petition, and we will be filing a separate claim for damages related to the intrusion and the smear campaign orchestrated through third-party PR firms. The judge didn't hesitate. Spousal support is denied. Additionally, Mr. Baldwin is ordered to pay Ms. Baldwin's legal fees in relation to the defense of this request. You are also instructed to provide a full disclosure of all financial holdings within 7 calendar days, or risk being held in contempt. She turned to Helen. File your additional motions. The court is open to hearing them. Bang of the gavel. Done. I didn't look at Daniel when we stood up. I didn't look at Rachel, but I saw Helen give the slightest nod. We walked out. In the hallway, Daniel followed. Claire, he said. I didn't stop. He raised his voice. Claire, can we talk? I turned, calm. What part of no do you not understand? He looked tired now, smaller. I didn't know it would go this far. Losing control always feels that way, I said. But you set this in motion. Now you get to live with it. He didn't follow me after that. I walked to the parking lot and drove home. Not triumphant, not victorious. Just clear. That night, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the table alone. I had spent months cleaning up a life I didn't destroy, and I wasn't finished. Because now that the legal battle was nearly over, I had one final decision to make. What to do with everything he tried to take. After the hearing, there was a kind of stillness I didn't expect. No emails from Daniel's lawyer, no calls from Rachel, no media leaks, just silence. For the first time in months, I woke up and didn't check my phone immediately. I walked to the kitchen, made coffee, and sat at the window without rushing to review filings or bank statements. I didn't realize how long I'd been holding my breath until I felt my chest relax without effort. The next few days moved slowly. Harriet finalized the full restructuring of the foundation. The properties were now under legal shields that couldn't be touched. The trust that held my remaining shares in the biotech firm was now managed through a third-party trustee. Daniel would never have a way in. Not again. But even with everything secured, I still felt like something was unfinished. One afternoon, Helen called and said the judge had signed the final decree. The divorce was legally complete. No appeals, no extensions. It's over, Claire, she said. It's really over. I thanked her. But I didn't feel anything. No joy. No anger. Just a kind of muted clarity. I spent that night going through a closet I hadn't touched in years. Inside were photos from my early career. Newspaper. Clippings. Business cards from the first 100 clients who trusted me before anyone knew my name. In one of the boxes, I found the original business plan I wrote when I was 32. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten on legal pads. I read every page, and when I finished, I cried. Not because I was sad, not because I missed anything, but because I had almost handed it all to a man who never deserved any part of it, and I had stopped it in time. I spent the following weeks cleaning my house, deep cleaning, not just dust and drawers. I replaced every picture frame that still had Daniel in it. I boxed up everything that belonged to him and had it couriered to a storage unit under his name. I donated half my wardrobe. I repainted the home office I once shared with him. I changed the locks, the alarm code, the passcodes to everything. By the end of the month, nothing in that house had his trace. But I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to erase him out of spite. I was just clearing space for my own life. Then, one morning, an envelope arrived. No return address. Again. I didn't open it right away. I placed it on the counter and went about my morning. Only later, after breakfast, did I finally sit down and read it. It was a handwritten note. No greeting. No name. It said, "You didn't have to do this. You could have let it go." That was it. 10 words. No threat. Just the echo of a man who still didn't understand that silence is not weakness. That letting go is not the same as giving up. I didn't report it. I didn't answer. I tore it in half and dropped it into the shredder. That was the last time I heard from him. Rachel never reached out. She moved to Florida, started working for some social media brand as a strategy advisor. I received a notification that the case we opened against her had been closed with a formal settlement. She paid restitution, signed a non-disclosure agreement, and disappeared from my world. That, too, was enough. 6 months later, I did something I had been postponing for years. I booked a one-way ticket to the coast. I bought a modest 2-bedroom condo in Santa Barbara. Not flashy, not oversized, just enough for me, and a guest room when I wanted company. The building had security, quiet neighbors, and a view of the ocean from the balcony. I brought only what mattered: my books, a few, paintings, my laptop, and a folder with the original patent documents from my company. Everything else stayed behind or was sold. The first night in the new place, I sat on the balcony with a glass of water, watching the sun go down. No music, no calls, no noise, just stillness. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to plan what came next. I had no battles to fight, no roles to play, no one to explain myself to, just a new morning waiting. A few weeks later, I received an email from the board of a women's business fund I used to mentor. They asked if I'd be open to teaching a small workshop. Nothing formal, just a few sessions on negotiation, finance, and building protections into early-stage startups. I agreed. The first meeting had 6 women, all over 50, all building something new after walking away from something broken. I didn't tell them my story. I didn't need to. They carried the same expressions I once wore: quiet resilience, tired eyes, and the kind of strength you only earn after being underestimated too many times. At the end of the last session, one of them stayed behind. She asked, "How do you know when you're truly free of it?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "When you stop needing to be believed by the people who tried to erase you." She nodded, and I could tell she understood. We said goodbye. I went home, made dinner, and fell asleep without checking the lock on the door twice. That had become a habit during the worst months. Not anymore. The next morning I walked to the beach. No shoes. No schedule, just the sound of the waves and my own breath. I sat in the sand for a long time, not thinking, just being, because I wasn't anyone's wife anymore. I wasn't someone's provider, or someone's problem, or someone's target. I was just Claire Baldwin, and for once that was enough.